Welcome to Hope in the Face of Cancer, where we share real stories of courageous people in their cancer journey. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Bonnie Hubert, a licensed therapist with the Memorial Hermann Canopy Cancer Survivorship Center. Memorial Hermann and CanCare are long-term partners, and through this collaboration, CanCare offers emotional support to patients at their cancer centers across the greater Houston area. Bonnie brings both professional expertise and a deeply personal connection to her work. Her journey into oncology care began when she cared for her mother during her ovarian cancer treatment, an experience that opened her eyes to a gap between medical treatment and the emotional support people need to navigate cancer survivorship. Dr. Bonnie is a member of the Canopy team, offering counseling and guiding support groups to help those facing cancer address challenges like fear of recurrence, isolation, and reintegration after treatment. She is also a Previvor, someone who understands firsthand the impact of medical procedures related to cancer and carries that personal perspective into her work. Through her role at Canopy, Bonnie's care and compassion reach far beyond the hospital walls. She walks alongside patients and caregivers through some of their most vulnerable moments and supports those facing cancer with her special gift and perspective. Bonnie, we're so glad to have you here, and we can't wait to hear your insights and share them with our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited just for our partnership to continue to grow, and this is another step in that journey. So thank you.
Absolutely. We absolutely love our Memorial Hermann family, and the Canopy is such an incredible destination for anyone facing cancer. So we love that so much. So would love to really talk about, for starts, and how you moved into this oncology space, because you've been a licensed counselor for many years, but you were not always in the cancer area. So, what kind of brought you into now dedicating your time to people facing cancer?
Well, I would say that, we all know someone that has or has had cancer. I don't think I've ever met anyone that doesn't know someone, whether it's a friend, a neighbor, a fellow church member, a family member. And so personally for me, my grandmother on my father's side passed away of cancer when I was 5. And growing up without her and hearing the stories about her and how I look like her and all of these things, it's always been on the periphery for me.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older, of course, being more aware of my health and potential risk factors and things like that, aware of my family history. And so it's always been on the periphery. But as you said, I've been a counselor for a lot of years, and I've counseled young adults, families, couples. But when my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2018, that is where it kind of all came right into my, not just peripheral view, but right here forward facing. And that diagnosis kind of shifted from me knowing a little bit about cancer and the cancer journey to understanding the details that nobody wants to know.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I have made that shift.
So I know you have mentioned in prior conversations about a gap that you really noticed when you stepped into that role as cancer caregiver to your mom, and you were kind of on playing a different role. You were on the other side. You weren't a care provider. You were, part of your mom's cancer support team, that you noticed some real noticeable gaps. Tell us a little bit about that and how that drove you to where you are.
Yeah. Well, first of all, my mom lives in San Antonio, Texas. And so there was a distance there. So I don't want to claim all of the caregiver role here. My father obviously was her primary caregiver through all of this. But during her journey, I have 3 siblings. There's 4 of us. So we all had I don't want to say a turn, but kind of we all played a part in her caregiving. And there were times when I was able to spend extended periods of time and see the day to day. And then, of course, when I was not with her physically, we were talking and chatting and FaceTiming and keeping up on a daily basis. And what I noticed so and maybe because I am a counselor, is I noticed that there was this gap. The doctors are taking care of your physical health, and there's such a plan where you're kind of like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. But it was the few days going into the first treatment of chemo, or the time during treatment, the struggle, the mental health struggle, the struggle to know, like, what is the future going to hold? Those days right before surgery, and kind of the mental health aspect of that. And then even at the end of treatment, where all of the treatment aspects are done and you get to ring the bell, people think, oh, well, you're done, but really you're not. And so a lot of times that's when it all lands, is once you've gone through all of the treatment and surgery and protocol, and now you've rung the bell, and the support that you had daily almost kind of falls away. And so that's where the biggest gap is, I think, is when you're finished and you've had all this support, and then all of a sudden you're just alone in your house with your thoughts.
Yes.
And it can feel really heavy.
That is so true. I mean, it's during the busy part of the cancer journey when you're in treatment that you tend to have the more people surrounding you and the more sense of community. And I think we hear that a lot from CanCare clients, that they ring the bell, but then they just begin to process that emotional part of the journey, and everybody's kind of disappeared around them. And so it's, that absence of support at one of the most critical times is an eye opener for most people. You don't think about, that happening after you celebrate the finish of treatment.
Yes, that's right.
So you've been a cancer caregiver. You are supporting cancer patients now, but you also really have your own personal cancer story. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So you had mentioned that I am a previvor. And what that means is that I have never been diagnosed with cancer, but I have a genetic mutation, well, actually more than one, that predisposes me to eventually have a cancer diagnosis. In fact, my oncology, gynecological oncologist told me that I had a 90% chance.
Wow.
With my family history, the genetic mutation of the BRCA2, and my mother, having gynecological cancer, and my grandmother passing away from breast cancer, that it was not if, but when. And so when that was presented to me, I was shocked. I was like, okay, I have these genetic mutations. They're telling me I have a 90% chance. What do I do? Well, there's two things that a person that gets that information can do. One is you can wait and watch and monitor and be very vigilant about going to the appointments and doing all that stuff. Or you can actually choose to prophylactically, you're choosing to have a double mastectomy, a hysterectomy. And so what essentially I was doing is I was pre-viving and saying, if I can go and do these types of procedures that sound really drastic when you're not even diagnosed with cancer yet, then my chances for getting cancer are reduced down. At the time, they said reduced down to 10 to 12%, which is about a normal person's rate or percentage of having these types of cancer diagnosis. So I know that sounds like someone said, you did all that and you still have a chance. And the answer is yes, but I will take a 10 to 12% over a 90% any day. So I can tell you that, it was hard. It was a life change for me in many ways, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. I would suggest to people to do it because of the benefits of that. So my lens comes from, yes, I can sit with people and I cannot tell them I understand how you feel or that I've been where you've been, but that maybe I can explain a little bit how a double mastectomy works when I'm sitting with a patient, or I can tell them about how, if they have specific questions, I might be a resource for that in that regard. So that's what being a previvor means. And I like I said before, I would do it again.
Was it a difficult decision, or was it one that was a no-brainer to you?
For me personally, it was not a difficult decision, and that is because I had already had my children. I
Yeah.
had the time I'd given birth to three children. I was a little bit, older as far as like having my kids were in their preteens and teens. It might be a more difficult decision for someone that's younger, that
Yeah.
maybe hasn't started a family yet. But for me personally, it was like, let's do this. Let's do it. Let's do this, because I want to be here. I want to have that percentage lower and be here for my family and my future. And if there's something I can do, and certainly we have to also note that this is completely evidence and research based,
Right.
right, outcomes. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
insurance companies would not pay for something that has that big of a price tag on it. And so there's also comfort in that as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Understandable. So your own journey, prevention journey, and your family, and now you're dedicating your career to supporting those with cancer. Tell us a little bit more about Canopy, which is just such an incredible place, and what you do and who you see there.
Absolutely. So Canopy Cancer Survivorship Center is an amazing place where anyone that has a cancer diagnosis, from day one of diagnosis through treatment and through survivorship for the rest of their lives, can come to find support. Support includes anything with emotional support, physical support, nutrition support, camaraderie and community. And this is for anyone treated anywhere. And the best thing about Canopy, I think, is that it is free of charge. No
Amazing.
one pays a dime for any services at Canopy Cancer Survivorship Center.
It's incredible. I mean, just visiting is it's overwhelming how amazing that place is. But I only recently learned that you didn't have to be a patient of the hospital system to go there and partake in their services. And there's even virtual support services too for people who may not be in that kind of north of Houston area around the country. So it's truly incredible. You mentioned in your mom's journey, that the physicians were, focused on her physical healing, but then there's all these other components. We like to look at it as a, kind of a quadrant. There's the physical cancer journey, there's the emotional, mental, and even spiritual. But for many people who may be listening, they haven't heard about, emotional support. And what does emotional support look like during a cancer journey? Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of challenges and emotions that you're seeing in the cancer patient population that you visit with on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. So the emotional journey begins day one when you hear a diagnosis and your name in the same sentence.
Yeah.
It is a traumatic and life-changing event. And it has different kind of components and the flow and the stages of all of it, right? So it's overwhelming, and then there's waves. We talk about these waves as we come up for various parts of treatment, and then when you're done. And so what does emotional support look like? Well, through what I do at Canopy, counseling. So that's one-on-one counseling. We're able to process through these emotions, right? Talk about the difficulty, the fear, the anxiety, the low points. And I'm able to give Canopy guests strategies to use through the whole time of treatment and beyond. Emotional support also looks like support groups, community of people that are also going through or are survivors themselves. And we have many support groups at Canopy, virtual and in person, to meet the needs of those that are feeling alone, right? A lot of times emotional turmoil is because you feel like you're alone and you have no one to turn to. So we have support groups, like we have a virtual breast cancer support group, a peer-led in-person support group for breast cancer. We have a stage 4 general cancer group. It's called Life in Between. We have a working professional support group. We have support group that are offered in the Spanish language for those that are native speakers in Spanish. And so it allows you to be buoyed up by a community of others that either are where you are now or are ahead of you in that journey. So that provides inspiration. Emotional support can also come from just connecting and being around others and not talking about cancer.
Yeah.
And just having fun. And so we have 45 plus programs every month on our calendar where people can come and experience a beautiful distraction. And that is also emotional support as well.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. But you're right, that is emotional support too. I think many people obviously facing a cancer diagnosis are primarily thinking naturally about their physical healing and survivability of their diagnosis. And they may not be thinking about counseling, peer support, these emotional support things. I mean, why do you, from your perspective, having, both seeing patients, but also from your personal perspective, why do you feel like having some kind of emotional support during the cancer journey is so important?
Well, I can go back to where, conversations I've had with my mom, and she would tell me that there were things that she felt, things that she thought, things that she struggled with that she couldn't talk about to other people around her, because most of the time she felt that she couldn't speak to like family members or church members that were visiting or whatever, because she was afraid that if she really talked about how she felt, it would make them sad. Mm-hmm. It would make them more worried. It would affect others in a negative way. And I've met so many incredible survivors. They put others before themselves.
Yes.
They think of others. And so they do not, seek out that one-on-one in a, like a setting where it would be counseling or maybe support groups. I do hear a lot of people finding support groups online and things like that, but they think of others. And so, they feel like nobody really gets it in my circle here. And so by reaching out and having one-on-one conversations with a professional, whether that's me at Canopy or a private therapist, then it allows you to be able to just like say what you want to say and not be ashamed of it or think twice about it. You can just have that ability to express yourself. And that is so important for mental health.
Agreed. I mean, I think there are reservations. People think, mental health counseling or going to see a therapist. There may be some stigma or misunderstanding about that. What would you say to someone who may be hesitant in taking that step?
I would say it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
It's a conversation where you get to tell your story and you get to share where you are and maybe get some insight to help you move through something that's hard. Look through a lens that you hadn't considered and to find relief. There is relief available, mental and emotional relief. And so it starts with a conversation.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. It's just a conversation. You also talk to many of your um, clients about peer support as well. From your perspective as a professional, when should someone facing cancer, and that could be the person diagnosed or their family member, when should they talk to someone like you, a therapist, versus when should they seek out, a peer-to-peer support like what CanCare provides?
Oh, well, I think they should probably happen simultaneously. CanCare is such an amazing organization because when you pair someone with someone else who has a same or similar diagnosis that is on the other side of it, that can be the most reassuring.
Mm.
And it's like a mentorship. And it's absolutely beautiful. When I've talked to clients that have had a CanCare mentor, I'm not sure if that's what you guys
Our
call it, but
volunteers.
that's a volunteer. I kind of see it as a mentor. Um, it just brings a sense of relief. It allows them to have someone to ask these questions to, and then also that inspiration of this person got through it, so can I. And I love that. And so that paired with seeking out some counseling or in a group,
Right.
a support group setting can be great. Now, here's the thing I caution people about though. And I don't think this happens with CanCare, but I do talk to clients that are in some online support groups that are not very positive or uplifting.
Right.
And so what happens is the people that are real positive and uplifting aren't attending the support groups. And so the people that are really struggling or having difficulty in their journey are in the support groups talking. And so newly diagnosed people will come in and they get really scared and they get more sad or more fearful. And so I would say to people that are watching this that are in those groups, if you're in a group like that or in anything that is not uplifting to you, not helping you, like in your book, Hope in the Face of Cancer, not giving you just good, positive thoughts, then I would say
find
leave
something
those
else.
groups. Find something else.
Yeah. That's an important point in our support groups because there are people who are hurting and they're looking for guidance. We always have a survivor volunteer in those groups who shares their story. So, there's a perspective of hope and inspiration there to bookend, the journey and what can be on the other side of treatment. So I hear that. You mentioned our book, and I was so excited to hear that you've in some ways prescribed our book to some of your clients. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I absolutely have. Again, I encourage clients to look for stories of hope and healing and not the concentrate on the stories that you hear that are not successful outcomes or they're just the struggle because
or going
when
to
you're in the
Dr.
middle of
Google.
it, yes, oh my gosh. So this has happened. We had a book signing at Canopy and you guys came and left a bunch of books. And so I have been recommending the books, and we have two in our library that we keep to check out for people, but we had all these extra books that you said, hey, you guys give these out, share them. And so I've passed out several. And I'll tell you, actually today I had a client come in and she told me that she keeps that book by her bed. And she's been struggling with fear of reoccurrence. And she said that this is the only thing that gets her out of her head. She will open up the book and read one or two stories. And she told me, I read a story with someone that had my exact cancer, and it just allowed me to fall asleep. And it relaxed me and it brought me peace. And that is a perfect example. It's a perfect example of how powerful those stories of hope are and how they can touch the lives of people that are newly diagnosed or going through treatment, or even in this person's case, now done with treatment and battling the fear of reoccurrence.
Yes. That's a very common fear, that we hear among our clients and our volunteers that are even, out many years. Well, thrilled to hear that that has provided her, hope and peace. I think it's just whatever the mechanism, it's finding those outlets where you're able to see down the path. You're able to see, someone who has survived your cancer, who may be 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, I think is a powerful source of hope and perspective for the cancer journey. So, however you can get that, it's definitely something.
It is. I love telling people my mother's story, stage 4
Yeah,
and ovarian, which is a really, really tough battle. And she's now 7 years out. And it's incredible, and I have an aunt who was diagnosed in 2002 and is still cancer free today. And I have another aunt that was diagnosed just 2 years ago, and she's finished and now is cancer free. And so these stories of hope and seeing
yes,
someone on the other side of it are just so inspiring. They're beautiful. And it's something that someone can hold on to and use to banish the negative thought and the
that's right.
fear as it comes up in a wave.
Absolutely. Fear can be your worst enemy during the journey. So, as you are
Yes.
visiting with patients in your practice, you are interacting with people at a very vulnerable time. What are some of the most common emotional challenges or fears that you see day in, day out?
I would say uncertainty is a theme that comes up that's
Mm,
really difficult for people to move through. And uncertainty can begin day one of diagnosis. There's waiting periods where you're
yes.
waiting to hear what staging you are. Then there's a waiting period to know what the treatment plan is going to be. And there's a waiting period to know when am I going to start? And then there could be a waiting period between various types of treatment. There's another uncertainty about, well, you might go through this and we may or may not need to do radiation. We may or may not need to give you
Yeah.
this pill to take for the next 5 years. And so there's this element of uncertainty. And so one of the strategies that I share with my clients very often, I call it don't look past the headlights.
Okay.
And there's kind of an analogy because I live down this country road where when you turn off from the main road, there's no street lights whatsoever. I
Mm,
mean, it's dark. If I were to turn off my lights in the car, it would be like pitch black on the road. You couldn't see a foot in front of you. And so what made me think of this analogy is we were going down the road and my husband was messing with me, and he like turned the lights out. I was a
oh my
passenger.
gosh.
He like turned the lights out and I'm like, oh my
You
God, you
can't see a
can't do
thing.
that. You cannot see a thing. You got to stop the car. Stop the car. And then he turned the lights back on and the lights shone and then it's calm. And I
Mm,
feel like that's kind of what happens is like you have this uncertainty. You feel like, oh my gosh, I'm in the dark. I can't see anything. I don't know what. And then the lights come back on. And you know what? Those headlights don't shine too far.
yeah.
We're not looking super far into the future, right? We're
Yeah.
not super far down the road. I've got maybe like what, 10, 20 feet in front of me here, but yet it's enough for me to continue on and
Mm,
feel safe to keep going. And so I talk to clients, I say, let's not look too past the headlights. There's no need to worry about what's going to happen in 5 or 6 months from now. We're going to think about 2 weeks and what's in the next 2 weeks, or maybe it's a month ahead of time. And so we're only going to focus on that and we're going to manage our brain.
yeah.
We can do that. We can help our brain. We can manage our brain. We can say, wait a second, I'm noticed that I'm worried about this thing that's uncertain, that's in the future. Okay, brain, stop. I'm only going to think to this date and not past that. And that has seemed to work well for a lot of my clients as they're dealing with uncertainty. Just keep it in the headlights. Don't look too far past that.
I love that. I've never heard, that particular analogy before. I think that's makes so much sense. And I hear that feedback or advice frequently in different ways, like, stay in the moment, live in the day, only focus on what's in front of you. There are, many different ways, but I think that analogy is super powerful and
Thank you.
helps people to get a little bit more sense of control over, their immediate moments. Any other,
Absolutely.
pieces of advice or tools that you find yourself often sharing that might be helpful for our listeners?
Well, this one's come up a lot recently, like in the last few months. I think that, again, when you hear your name and a diagnosis in the same sentence, right? It's a traumatic and life-changing event. It
Yeah.
also causes you to look at the world through a different lens. You
Mm,
look at things differently. You see the world differently. You see your
yes.
family differently. And what I've noticed too is people lately in these conversations is they're looking back in the past
Hmm.
and they are kind of evaluating themselves and their life choices and how
Mm,
they've treated people or what choices that they've made. And it's really easy to look back and judge yourself in a
mm,
bad way and then feel sad. And that can hit pretty hard when you're given a diagnosis like cancer.
yeah.
And so what I have been encouraging people to do is when they look back to not judge themselves with the wisdom that they have today,
Mm,
but to know that that person in that moment of time was doing the best they could with what they had and the knowledge, the tools they had in that moment. And so when we bring it back to the present moment, we look ahead, right? Post-traumatic growth is what I
mm,
call it. It's growth. What are we going to do with what we're going through? What are
yeah.
we going to do with what we've been through? And now we have this wisdom. We have life experience or tools. And now we can make choices that align with the person we are now or we want to be. So there's an element of that conversation of looking forward instead of looking backward for
Right.
something that we really can't change.
And
So
and both of those analogies and exercises kind of focus you on being present, in the here and now, not looking back, not worried about the future, but just really focusing on the present day and thriving in the present day.
absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. We love for our listeners to have a closing message of hope from our guests. What message of hope would you want to leave with someone listening today? Maybe they have recently heard those words, you have cancer, or someone that they're caring for has. What would you like to leave them with from your unique perspective as a previvor, a caregiver, and a mental health professional?
What I would want someone to know is that they are resilient.
Mm,
And we can become even more resilient as we tap into resources that are around us. We can increase that resilience. So I would say to look at resources that you can tap. So, for example, Canopy Cancer Survivorship Center, CanCare, support groups that are uplifting and inspiring. When you can reach in and find support through those organizations, you will remain resilient and there is hope. So continue that journey and look for resources around you that will help you in any way, shape, or form that you can.
I love that. Thank you so much, Bonnie. I'm definitely got a few nuggets from you today that I will carry with me and I know share with so many others. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for the heart that you bring to our cancer community and just the light. And we so appreciate your dedication to our cancer community. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of Hope in the Face of Cancer. If you or someone you love is facing cancer, CanCare is here to support you. Visit us at cancare.org to learn more. Until next time, remember, there is always hope in the face of cancer. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hope in the Face of Cancer, a survivor by your side. If you or someone you know is facing cancer or is supporting a loved one through their journey, we invite you to share this podcast. Thank you for your support in our efforts in the cancer community. No one should face cancer alone.